Human biocomputer. Is it true that thought is material? Recently, there have been reports that American researchers have been able to calculate the weight of human thought. It ranges, in their opinion, from 10 to 30 grams, which is quite heavy. What is consciousness? Consciousness is our ability to think, reason, determine our ability to reality, our attitude to reality. It reminds our muscles how to ride a bike or drive a car, tell us that we have a business meeting next Monday, and participates in many decisions. Consciousness can be imagined as a large organizer thought right in our head, in which we keep all the information we need. But does consciousness belong to us? Scientists say that the brain is a kind of being in a being, and it seems to live and act within us, but according to its own laws unknown to us. There are thousands of documented cases from medical practice when people live and retain their mental abilities with complete or partial absence of a brain or with complete cerebral hydrocephalus. Such facts and evidence make scientists recognize the fact that consciousness exists independently of the brain. So John Eccles, the largest neurophysicist and Nobel Prize winner in medicine, believed that the psyche is not a function of the brain, the psyche, well, the soul in other words. Together with his colleagues, neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield, who has performed more than 10,000 brain surgeries, Eccles wrote the book, The Mystery of Man. In it, the authors explicitly state that they have no doubt that a person is controlled by something outside his body. In other words, it's not just physical, flesh. Two more Nobel Prize winners, neurophysiologist David Hubel and Thorsten Wiesel, have repeatedly said in their speeches and scientific works, in order to assert the connection between the brain and consciousness, you need to understand what exactly reads and decodes the information that comes from the senses. However, as they emphasize, this is not yet possible. A research team led by Dr. Sam Parnia conducted an experiment for 4.5 years with 2,600 patients in 15 hospitals. Scientists have collected evidence that the human consciousness is still working, even if the rest of the body, including the brain, can already be considered dead. So consciousness is still alive when the body no longer is alive. The brain, like any other organ of the human body, consists of cells and cannot think. However, it can work as a device that detects thought like a television receiver, which first receives waves and then converts them into sound and image. This is what the conclusion of Sam Parnia was. A person can be compared to a biocomputer, participating in the exchange of information on the internet of the noosphere. Noosphere, nous is a Greek word meaning mind. The fact that our brain is a transceiver of electromagnetic signals is a reliable fact, but modern methods of registering them are not yet sensitive enough, and our consciousness is just an instrument that is given to us for the perception of this world, and its activity has a creative power. Scientists from the Canadian Queen's University conducted an experiment in which volunteers were seated in the center of a room and another person's gaze was periodically directed to the back of their heads. Approximately 95% of the subjects noted that they clearly felt the effect of the gaze on themselves as passing pressure on the back of their head. Can thought change reality? That reminds me of something else. Have you ever been in a bus or a train and you notice that you feel that someone's looking at you, you turn your head and you fix your eyes on that person that's actually looking at you? Well, how does that happen? Anyway, back to this. Can thought change reality? Modern science has evidence that thought is material. With our thoughts, we create our own personal reality, which is formed on the basis of our beliefs, and this reality can be changed, but how? With the help of all the same thoughts. American researcher in the field of neurophysiology and neuropsychology, Jose Dispenza, was one of the first to study the influence of consciousness on reality from a scientific point of view. It happened after the tragedy. Dispenza was hit by a car. Doctors suggested that he fasten the damaged vertebrae with an implant, which could subsequently lead to lifelong pain, but only in this way, according to doctors, could he walk again. However, Dispenza decided to challenge traditional medicine and restore his health with the power of thought. And just 9 months later, he went again. He walked again. But the key discovery made by this scientist is that the brain does not distinguish between real and imagined experiences. For example, Dispenza conducted such an experiment. Its members were divided into two groups. People from the first group pressed the spring mechanism with the same finger every day for an hour. People from the second only had to imagine that they were clicking the spring. And as a result, the finger of the subjects from the first group strengthened by 30% and from the second by 22%. So their finger strengthened even though they weren't using it in actuality, you see. So Joe Dispenza proved that for the brain and neurons, there is not much difference between real and material experience. This means that if we pay attention to negative thoughts, our brain perceives them as a reality and causes corresponding changes in the body. For example, illness, fear, depression, outburst of aggression, etc. How to rejuvenate with your imagination. The idea that thoughts and emotions generated at the same time by several people can affect reality has been expressed for a long time. That's the same thing, by the same reason, the way people pray, a lot of people praying for something or a person to get well, for example, could happen. Or even the opposite, right? God forbid. But so the idea that thoughts and emotions generated at the same time by several people can affect reality has been expressed for a long time. But this idea belonged more to the sphere of esotericism than science. In the 1990s, scientists at Princeton University decided to test it with an experiment. They worked with a random number generator. It usually outputs roughly equal numbers of zeros and ones. During the experiment, the operators had to inspire the machine to produce more zeros or conversely ones. To do this, they intensely thought about the desired, and the results that the generator showed exceeded the probabilities. The experimenters also noticed that when two people participate in the experiment, their influence on the generator increased. However, the results looked more impressive if there was a strong emotional connection between the participants. Imagination is one of the most dynamic human capabilities. In the UK, scientists have proven that the power of thought can even rejuvenate. In a study of volunteer participants, older men who had crossed the 70s, they were asked to change their way of thinking. They were asked to think and act as if each of them suddenly dropped 20 years. The subjects followed the recommendations by changing their way of thinking, daily routine, and their usual activities. Less than a week later, the authors of the experiment noted the first changes, and they were physiological and therefore easily amenable to elementary checks. In tests and analysis, it was found that all participants who began to think and act like younger men had improved vision and hearing. Their joints became more flexible, and coordination of movements improved. And these changes were by no means short-term. They were entrenched in those who, even after the end of the study, continued to think and act like a younger man. In conclusion, we will mention one more experiment, or rather an interesting experience. A Chinese physicist, head of the department of Tsinghua University, Bohai Dui, once asked the students to whom he was lecturing to mentally wish him ill. And this happened in a lecture. 300 people got down to business at once. Someone imagined terrible situations with the professor. Someone inwardly swore at him. And what? The next day he was unable to go to work. The results of the blood test, which he donated for verification, were close to critical. Even his blood showed that. The professor was treated on the principle of like. This time 300 students mentally wished him well. The scientists regained strength. The analysis returned to normal, and by the way, Bahai Dewey later wrote a book on this topic, and in it he popularly explained that man is not the king of nature at all, but only an electromagnetic system. There you go. Isn't that fascinating? So prayer does work. Even the scientists have now proved this. And this is by Solask. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.